Good evening and welcome to the January the 8th Pitt County Commissioners meeting. I will call our meeting to order. If you would, let's have roll call.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we excuse Commissioner Mary Perkins-Williams.
Okay, got a motion and a second. All those in favor, if you would cast your vote. Okay, thank you. Is that good for our call to order? Great. All right, if you would stand with me and we'll have our invocation by Commissioner McLaughlin.
Shall we pray? Eternal God, we come first of all to thank you. We thank you for this day. Thank you for life, health, and strength. Ask that you bless this meeting and have it to be as you so please. These and all blessings, we ask in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner McLaughlin. If you would, stand with me and we'll have Mrs. Haley Haysauer from Aiden Grifton step to the podium and tell us a little something about yourself and lead us in the pledge.
Good evening. My name is Haley Paysauer. I'm a senior at Aiden Grifton High School. I'm currently very involved in FCA, which stands for Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I serve on the leadership team there at Aiden Grifton and also for Pitt County. And I also am in FFA, Future Farmers of America, and I used to be the president of our chapter at Aiden Grifton. So thank you for having me this evening, and at this time, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Haley.
Thank you.
Hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, if you would vote, please. Okay, the agenda is approved. Do we have any public addresses?
You have no one signed up to speak for public addresses to the board.
Okay, all right, we will move on to presentations. The proclamation recognizing the January 2024 as Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month.
And if we could go down front, Mr. Chairman, to present items number 1 and 2. And as we're going, the board will need to adopt the proclamation.
So move.
Second. If Pam Strickland and her group would come forward. It is my pleasure this evening to present a proclamation recognizing Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month for January 2024. Before I read it, if Pam Strickland, you will introduce yourself and those that you have with us this evening.
Hi, I'm Pam Strickland. I'm the founder of North Carolina Stop Human Trafficking and the facilitator for the Pitt County Coalition Against Human Trafficking, who is represented here today. So we had Venus Curry, who was with the Pitt County Sheriff's Office, Maria Pinto, who was with the Center for Family Violence Prevention, Shanita
James.
who, well, I'm sorry, you just
Social
told me.
worker with comprehensive intervention.
We have Vanessa Behrman, who works with North Carolina Stop Human Trafficking, John Belton, who is a board member with NC Stop Human Trafficking, and Melinda Sampson, who is the Chief Operating Officer for NC Stop Human Trafficking.
Well, thank you all so much for being with us this evening. And I'll read this proclamation. It reads, whereas human trafficking involves the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, buying, or selling of human beings for their services in labor or commercial sex through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And whereas human trafficking violates basic human rights and deprives victims of human dignity and freedom. And whereas human trafficking is a national problem, with North Carolina being consistently ranked among the top 15 states for prevalence in human trafficking. And whereas in Pitt County, the Pitt County Human Trafficking Multidisciplinary Team responds to local victimization at increasing rates. And whereas sex buyers are the reason that children and adults are being groomed and recruited by traffickers into the exploitive sex industry. And whereas our community must hold accountable those people who purchase sex, exploit workers, and those people who look the other way. And whereas the Pitt County Coalition Against Human Trafficking seeks to eradicate human trafficking by empowering organizations and individuals through collaboration, leadership, and training. And whereas North Carolina Stop Human Trafficking, ECU Help, Daughters of Worth, Pitt County Sheriff's Office, Greenville Police Department, the Center for Family Violence Prevention, and many other organizations are active members of the Pitt County Coalition Against Human Trafficking and the Pitt County Human Trafficking Multidisciplinary Team. And whereas the Pitt County Board of Commissioners is committed to protecting people vulnerable to human trafficking and acting to end human trafficking by holding the sex buyers and traffickers accountable. Now therefore, the Pitt County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim January 2023 as Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month and commend its observance to all citizens. Adopted this the 8th day of January 2024, signed by Chairman Mark C. Smith, attested by Kimberly Hines, Clerk to the Board, and I will have the chairman present that to you.
On behalf of the Board of Commissioners, thank you all for your hard work and dedication to this cause. Thank you.
And if we could pose for a picture. Thank you. And if you did not get a ribbon on the way in, I think Pam can get you out.
Set you up.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And if Jason George would come forward. We can stand right on the dot. Thank you so much for being here. This is always a wonderful time to celebrate. The Pitt County Employee of the Month program started in March of 2022 to create an opportunity for employees to celebrate one another by recognizing extraordinary efforts of fellow employees in serving the citizens of Pitt County through their hard work, dedication, and contributions in fulfilling Pitt County's mission to enhance the health, safety, and well-being of our community by advocating for and providing quality services in a friendly and cost-effective manner. These employees of the month embody the county's vision of being a leader in the state and best in the East. For the month of December, our employee of the month is Jason George. He's a programmer, analyst 2 in Management Information Systems who has been with the county since 2013. His nominator stated that he assists with changes, updates, and everything in between for the performance review application that is used by all employees, that Jason provides technical insights and assesses requests so that employees can make informed decisions and receive proper approvals as needed. Nominator says he's an expert at accomplishing a task with minimal disruption to the user, even if it means more work for himself. So please join me in congratulating Jason George as December's Employee of the Month, and the chairman will present you with his certificate that reads, Employee of the Month, December 2023, presented to Jason George, Management Information Systems, in recognition of your dedication and exemplary service to Pitt County government and the citizens we serve. Also accompanied by receipt of a $100 thank you check, and the chairman will present.
On behalf of the Board of Commissioners,
Andy, you have family with you here today? Would you like them to be in the picture?
Come on, family.
Let's do one without and one with.
Wait a minute, he's got a Cowboys.
Your man's all right.
Thank you. And then we know that behind every good employee is a supportive family, and so thank you so much for being here, and we'll get one picture together. Do you want to introduce us to the family?
It's my wife Jasmine, my son Caden, and my daughter Ava.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll all speak to them for a picture. Thank you so much.
I saw that. Sure.
Okay, we will move on to public hearings. We have the preliminary assessment resolution, Oak Hill East. Mr. James Rhodes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We're bringing back for your consideration tonight, after a public hearing, additional action concerning the Oak Hill East Road Improvement Project. I'll give a brief staff overview of where we stand to date and a little bit more insight about the final assessment resolution that you'll be considering tonight. So as you know, we do have a county policy that coincides with general statutes that authorizes this type of project to be considered by the county. Specifically, in this case, we have some, what the state now terms as orphan roads that there's no one taking care of them. So in turn, what is being proposed is that the county would provide the funding for these roads to be brought up to standard 2, NCDOT, Department of Transportation, so they would be then maintained in perpetuity by the state. So that's the gist of it, and in so offering that funding for this particular project, there would be an assessment to the property owners that are benefiting from that. There are certain requirements that have to be met, and we've kind of been through those hurdles over the last few months. 75% of the affected property owners have to be in concurrence and offer a petition. That amount of property owners also has to have at least 75% of the road frontage that's being considered. Both of those are being met. We're at about 79% of the property owners and about 83% of the road frontage. There's also, of course, first, before that, ensuring that there is not a developer available to handle these improvements. And through the review of the legal staff as well as planning, we agree that there is no one at this point in time. So the board action to date, this is back at your November meeting. You did authorize using funding that is currently held by the finance office from repayment from previous projects. Remember, we've done one for Woodmore and Woodmore Farms subdivisions. At that point in time, you did adopt the preliminary assessment resolution, establish this meeting as your public hearing date for the final one, and then also authorize our engineering staff has moved forward with soliciting bids from qualified contractors. So in your package tonight, a lot of information. There have been notices about this as prescribed through general statute. It's been certified. There's a number of other items in your package. Some of the highlights from the final assessment resolution, again, re-acknowledging about the repayment funds would be used to actually fund this particular project. Our finance officer has verified that there are sufficient funds at this point in time based off the bids that have been secured. There is a bid tally sheet in your package. We had 2 contractors to bid. We are recommending the one for $78,000. It also, in this final assessment resolution, offers a 10-year repayment plan of sorts, no interest charged. So I just want to make sure you are aware of that. That is what we have done for the other 2 projects to date. Also, as an example, using the $78,000 bid that's come in, given a calculation for the amount that would be assessed per year for the affected property owners, in this case, without any change orders to the bid and other things, we're looking at a little bit better than $200 per year for the 10-year term being the assessment, and that would be handled through the tax assessor's office. So kind of if things progress on with the action that's before you tonight, looking at awarding the contract to the selected contractor next month. When the weather breaks, usually in springtime is going to be the best time to move forward with any paving work. We would have the contractor on site doing that. Also, DOT is heavily involved. We haven't done anything. If DOT doesn't consent to taking these roads onto the state system, they will be involved throughout. So at that point in time, we would also ask that DOT accept those roads for maintenance later in the summer. There are, as I've mentioned, the tax assessor would be involved. There's a tax assessment role that has to be handled through a public hearing. That would be probably in the fall of this year. So tonight, after your public hearing, we're recommending two things. Accepting the alternate bid for Tripp Brothers at that set amount and authorizing the manager to sign the associated contract, and then also adopting the final assessment resolution based on this contract being awarded. So with that, Mr. Chair, we're ready for our public hearing.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing, and I think we have one signed up.
Nick Rupp. If the attorney will read the statement.
Mr. Chair, if I may read
Yes,
the
sir.
statement. With this public hearing now open, Pitt County welcomes comments on the preliminary resolution assessment for Oak Hill East. Please state your name and address, and each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak.
Sure. Hey, thanks. My name's Nick Rupp, and I'm in Oak Hill East subdivision, 1072 Scarlet Oak Drive. And I was the individual kind of spearheaded the effort for this road project, and went around door to door to get participants to agree. And once they understood the costs will only go up if we delay the road project, most people were eager to sign the petition. One individual did not sign because they did not want a lien placed against his property. I did not know at the time that there is an option for someone to pay the entire amount at the when the tax bill comes due. So I think if he were aware, he would probably have signed the petition. So anyway, if there are any questions about the petition or what happened, we've had a meeting. James has been involved in the process, and Gene Pittman, before he retired, was involved as well. So it's been very informative, learned a lot about the roads, and happy to get them on the NCDOT's ledger instead of the homeowner's responsibility. But I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rupp.
That's all that we have signed up to speak.
Okay, we will close the public hearing. What's the pleasure to board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is that both parts of what
Yes.
they need? Okay, let's vote.
Thank you.
Okay, unanimous. We'll move on for items for report. GFO, Sam Crowell.
Good evening, Chairman Smith, Commissioners, Manager Gallagher. This evening, I bring you a good news item in Pitt County receiving the General and Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the 27th straight year. This award is the highest form of recognition in governmental budgeting. It represents a significant achievement for Pitt County. The GFOA determined that our annual budget book was proficient as a policy document, a financial plan, an operational guide, and a communication device. Tonight, I'd like to recognize Susan Stokes, our budget administrator, and Devin Johnson, our budget and grant analyst from our budget office, for their work in preparing this award-winning budget book, and congratulate them on a job well done. There is no recommendation for the board tonight. This is just a report only and for informational purposes only. And this is a copy of the budget book that they actually put together for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Did anyone say that it was 27 consecutive years that we've received that recognition?
He did mention that.
It was in our book, but I didn't know it was said.
Okay, we'll move on to the manager report.
A handful of items for the board this evening. Your next meeting dates are January 22nd and February 5th. In this room, the January 22nd meeting is a morning meeting at 8:30 for your capital improvement capital budgeting workshop. February 5th, 6 p.m. is your next regular meeting. As we do with service awards now, I'll read out the names of those employees who are having milestones of 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, and 25 years of service with Pitt County. And then, as you'll see on your agenda, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., we will present their certificates during their regular workday and provide a breakfast reception and invite all commissioners to attend that event if you are available. But for 5 years of service within Pitt County government, we recognize David Anderson with the Sheriff's Office, Heriberto Calles with Buildings and Grounds, Chantel Campbell with Detention, Angel Corpening, Social Services, Akelia Dale, Social Services, Vincent Gallardo, Detention, David Golterman, Tax Administration, Mallory Norris, Social Services, Lakita Richardson, Social Services, Troy Scheller, Sheriff's Office, and Stephen Tomlinson in Detention. For 10 years, we'll be recognizing April Biggs with Social Services, Tamika Bryant with Social Services, Rhonda Dawson with Social Services, Sheila Dixon with Social Services, Jonathan Joyner with Information Systems, and Sydney Wainwright in the Sheriff's Office. For 15 years, we'll recognize John Maynard with Solid Waste and Recycling, Merle Overton in Social Services, and Randy Patterson in Information Management Systems. For 20 years, Tammy Corbett with Social Services, Nikki Delenti in the Sheriff's Office, Eric Gooby in Planning, John Madigan in Detention, Michael Stroud in the Sheriff's Office, and Candace Teal in Social Services. And then finally, with 25 years of service, we'll recognize Sandra Andrews with Human Resources, Lisa Nichols, the Register of Deeds, Monica Pons in Information Management Systems, and Sonia Scott in Social Services. So we look forward to presenting those employees, our greatest asset in Pitt County government, tomorrow morning with their certificate and celebrate them over breakfast. Item D is a reminder for those who have signed up to attend that January 23rd from 12 to 2 at the Martin County Telecenter is the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners District 2 meeting. On January 25th from 11:30 to 1 o'clock, wanted to make the board aware that Pitt County is again a gold sponsor for the Chamber of Commerce Economic Forecast Luncheon. If any commissioners are interested in attending that event, let Kimberly know, and she will assign you a seat. Item F, Pitt Community College Board of Trustees for the last 2 years has invited us to a joint board meeting between the Board of County Commissioners and the College Board of Trustees. And they are proposing that we meet again this year. They've suggested February 22nd as a potential date for that meeting. And if this board continues to be interested in that joint meeting, which I highly recommend, you'll be receiving an invitation later this week to confirm that date.
What time?
It will be in the morning. I believe breakfast will be served at 8:15, and then the meeting would go from 8:30 to 9:30 on February 22nd, and we'll get an invitation. That's the tentative proposed time, and then an invitation to follow from the community college later this week.
Do we need to verify that do we need to vote on that tonight?
You don't need to vote on it, but when you get your invitation, if you'll let Kimberly know
Okay.
your response, she'll assure that your response is received, so they'll have enough food for us. The next item is a Personnel Ordinance, Section 49, and it is on page 34 of your agenda package. And this is to let the board know its current status and find out if you have other direction. When I first became county manager in January of 2022, one of the things that we discussed, was equity within pay and the authority of the manager or lack thereof to adjust any salaries as needed at that time. The board set a dollar threshold on that amount, and as an additional protection, required any action to be with the concurrence of the Chief Financial Officer and Human Resources Director, and they provided a sunset date of January 10th, 2024. So if this policy sunsets this week, then any special raise request in order to achieve equity or retain an employee would have to come to this board for action. If you extend this sunset date, then I would continue to have that authority as your manager in handling those personnel matters. My recommendation would be that it continue. In the very beginning, there were some known inequities that were addressed right at the get-go. After the first month or so of this policy, it's few and far between that the policy is exercised. But if a matter comes to my attention where we need to create equity within a department, for example, somebody comes in at a salary that makes the person supervising that person have less money. Or if somebody has a legitimate offer for another employer and a small amount of money would make a difference in keeping that person here, this gives me that discretion. If not, all of those come to this board. And I think part of the reason we needed this policy 2 years ago was because of the hesitation to take these small matters to the board, where somebody's personnel situation then is subject to board review, open session action. And so the matters weren't requested, they didn't come forward, and we wound up with these compression issues that I didn't have a way to deal with. So there are really two choices before the board this evening. One is to let it sunset. The second, which is my recommendation, would be to have me bring back at your next meeting a revised ordinance that extends this for another 2 years.
Mr.
I
Nicholson?
want to see it extended.
I second it.
Was that a motion?
I'll make it a motion. to
Okay.
extend
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry, I thought you made it.
We're gonna make it a motion.
We'll make it a motion.
And you're gonna second it?
Yes, and I'll second it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I guess I was just asking, is it necessary to bring it back, or can we just extend it now?
If you do it right now, we won't need to bring it back.
Well, that'd be even better.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's cast our vote now. There you go.
Thank you.
Life is so easy.
And then the last item is for your information. It was in your packet, and when you came this evening, you may recall, at the last few meetings of 2023, there was a conflict of interest statement on your agenda as best practice to remind the board about conflicts of interest. An alternate way to do that, as discussed with your current chair, is to have each board member sign a conflict of interest statement annually and then not have to repeat it each meeting. So you've been provided with that conflict of interest statement form. If you have not signed it already, please do so before you leave. Kimberly Hines, as clerk to the board, will keep all of those on file, and we will assure that you are reminded and sign that form annually. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Madam Manager. We'll move on to items for consent. Have a motion for that?
Motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your vote, please. Okay, we'll move on to items for decision. County Parks and Recreation Department, James Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, another item to bring back for further discussion tonight, but first up, let's show you a few pictures about what's going on if you hadn't been out to these sites lately. Our county engineers running, and his staff are running pretty much full speed because there's a lot of construction going on. This is just a few pictures of, number one, the office park location, and you can see the sand in the background there. That's the building pad for our new gymnasium, community center, north of the river. And you can kind of see, oriented, if you haven't been by there, just to the left side of this is the Arboretum, and just beyond that is the Ag Center. So that kind of puts you in perspective as to where it's located out there on that site. That's some really good soil. I think of Commissioner James when I see this, because this is good sandy soil. It is going ahead straight forward on this site. The other site, Alice F. King, not quite as good of soil out here, and we're having some challenges, but nonetheless, a lot of activity. If you've been by there, there's a nice pond being constructed out front for stormwater purposes. And then you can kind of see this is a different perspective facing back out to County Home Road. That's the farmer's market right dead straight in front of you. Oops. And you can see here, this is the building pad for the new community center, just adjacent to the community schools and recreation building. There'll be a breezeway of sorts connecting the two buildings. So a lot of activity out there. So that leads to our discussion for tonight. You might recall back in August, we did discuss about a park and recreation department being brought under the umbrella of the county. We've had a lot of discussions about that since you gave us the authorization to talk further with the Board of Education. Some of the ideas and information that's been provided, Human Resources has been actively involved in securing information about the existing staff and making sure that we can move those individuals into comparable positions with the county. We have also met with community schools and recreation staff, and I'm going to stop because we can't talk parks and recreation. We've got Alice Keene here, and also Jennifer Lanier Coward, who's the community schools and recreation assistant director. They're in the audience tonight, so I at least wanted to acknowledge them. We've also brought all the staff in for community schools and recreation and talked about the potential transition. So those discussions have been had. We're in the midst of developing an updated Parks and Recreation plan for the county. That group has helped us secure enough information from comparable counties to come up with a proposal tonight. We have prepared an organizational chart and a tentative fiscal year 24-25 budget that includes the current staff as well as projected new staff members needed for these community centers as well as the existing activities. So this was in your package, I believe, and this is just an idea of structurally an organizational chart showing what's needed both at Alice F. Keene Park as well as the new office park to open the doors when these buildings are available, hopefully at the very beginning of 2025. So with that, Mr. Chairman, what we're asking for tonight is to allow staff to continue this process and bring forward a proposal in your upcoming budget to develop a very detailed budget for this particular department. So with that, we'll leave that motion up and ask for any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Motion authorized.
Okay.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to move forward with this. Cast your vote, please. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. Next up is the allocation for second-year opiate settlement funding. Madam Manager.
Thank you. I'm going to come around front for this short presentation. Thank you, James, for getting that up for me, and I'm going to click it forward this way. You are used to seeing Jennifer Roman, who was our ARPA and opioid coordinator, make these presentations to you. Jennifer transferred to another position, and her position is vacant at this point. So I'm taking her hard work and presenting it to you this evening as we move forward. Really wanting to provide you with an update, the impact of what you've done in year one, and recommendations for year two. I'm best off going this way. Okay. So just by way of recap, we filed our lawsuit for opioid settlement in 2018, and settlements began happening in 2021. You used to hear us talk about a number of $26 billion as the amount of the national settlement. Because of additional settlements in Wave 2, that's now $44.5 billion nationwide in opioid settlements. Nationally. In North Carolina, we received $1.3 billion of that national settlement. And you can see how those defendants have distributed that total amount. This PowerPoint presentation is also at each of your place settings if it's easier to follow along there. But you can see who the settling defendants are and the amount allocated to each of them, and continuing to note of those settling defendants, as some settle, the total number rises, as some file bankruptcy, the total number falls. But Pitt County is currently receiving approximately $16 million of North Carolina's $1.3 billion portion. And I know these numbers are small, but you can look at them closer if needed. This shows the updated Pitt County payment schedule and the payments that we are anticipated to receive over the next 18 years, our final payment being in fiscal year 2038 to 2039. Total funds received to date, as anticipated, are a little over 1.8 million, and those were payments received from May 31st through November 9th of this past year. Last year, you allocated fiscal year 1 funds in a total amount of $810,000. And as indicated on your form, you divided those funds between the Pitt Community College Reentry Program, ECM for Change Syringe Exchange Program for harm reduction, Pitt County Public Health to restock Narcan at the detention center vending machine, Pitt County Coalition on Substance Abuse for Education and Training, and East Carolina University for an addiction specialist fellowship in order to train the providers and provide services here in our community, and then keep those specialist providers here to address those suffering from opioid addictions. That leaves remaining funds available to allocate in year 2, just over $1 million. Remember, there's no time deadline to spend these funds, and what we don't spend will continue to accumulate for larger projects. Year 1 impact has been incredible. The Community College Reentry Program served 614 individuals over this past year. In 2023, 54 of them received ongoing counseling and treatment for opioid addiction. 72 of them received housing services, and this funding allowed them to hire a part-time licensed substance abuse therapist, which has had a tremendous impact on the participants in that program. ECM for Change is a syringe exchange program in the community. You allocated $100,000. They've spent $75,000 to date, touching 857 participants during this time frame. They had 109 that they referred to employment resources, 56 to treatment services for opioid use disorder, and 73 referred to mental health services. Diane Carden-Glenn runs this program, and she has a very unique and special relationship with some of the most vulnerable members of our community and touches a large number of them through this program. I'm thrilled we were able to support her efforts to do so. Pitt County Public Health spent $5,000 restocking the Narcan machine at the detention center, which was empty, and ultimately distributed 386 intranasal naloxone kits to stop an opioid overdose in process. Pitt County Coalition on Substance Abuse executed a contract for education and prevention services, as well as an opioid response team, rapid response team. To date, they have not spent any of their funds, but their contract is still available for them to do so through the end of this fiscal year. And then East Carolina University's fellowship that we talked about, which was really your flagship expenditure in year 1, was a $500,000 investment, and that contract is still pending. We've worked diligently with East Carolina University. They've not yet returned an executed contract due to many of their processes, and they have not spent any dollars to date. But we continue to work with them, and we'll address any, I think, legal concerns that they may have with the contract when they get back to us. Just a quick reminder, I'm not going to go through all these with you. Your North Carolina Memorandum of Understanding sets forth how we can spend these funds. Option A expenditures require no formal strategic plan, and they're listed. This is how we've spent them and how we'll continue to spend them, the money. Option B allows for more detailed or complex expenditures, but it does require a formal strategic plan. So here's our timeline for year 2, our second fiscal year of receiving these funds. The North Carolina Memorandum of Understanding requires that we have an annual meeting with all municipalities because only municipalities over a certain dollar threshold receive their own funds. In Pitt County, only Greenville receives their own funds. Everyone else relies on us to touch the full county. We did hold that required municipalities meeting on August 29th. On November 12th, you may recall over a year ago, we convened a group called, they call themselves PCOC, the Pitt County Opioid Action Coalition. And what we did in the very beginning, when everybody was saying, how are you going to spend your funds, how are you going to spend your funds, we said, all get into one room, create a coalition, tell us what you think for consideration, and then continue talking. And that's been a very productive group led by Lily Malpas at the Pitt County Coalition Against Substance Use to keep every person in the spectrum of opioid education, prevention, down to treatment in the same room, they continue to meet quarterly and will continue to meet quarterly to give recommendations to us, give us feedback, and speak among each other. If you adopt the recommendations this evening, we'll come back in February with the spending authorization, we'll draft contracts, and then we'll release those two funds prior to the new fiscal year. That municipalities meeting was a small showing, but we had municipal representatives from Grifton and the Village of Simpson. We had citizen representatives come from ECU Health, Pitt County Coalition Against Substance Use, Hope is Alive, and Hope Restoration. And the comments at that municipalities meeting really focused on prevention and education, wanting to be sure we continued funding all elements of the continuum of care. Talked a lot about transitional housing support and the desire to be sure that we're providing housing and employment services for folks who are coming out of recovery, and then access to care in rural communities. So taking all of that information, we combine that with the PCOC recommendations. And they said, in a perfect world, we would love to see these entities funded or touched with your opioid settlement funds going forward. And they didn't put a timeline on it, but they let us know that all of these stakeholders think these initiatives are important. They thought we needed to continue to fund ECM for Change for harm reduction. They thought that ECU could provide services through what they call a Navigate clinic, almost an extension of once we get the specialists here and we're providing those services, funding some of their clinic operations. They talked about funding for Pitt County Oxford houses. Those are houses in the community for folks who are recovering from addiction. They talked about refunding the reentry program. They talked about support for continuing education and prevention. They wanted to support the Pitt County Sheriff's Office in her Sharp and Wear programs and provide her the direct funding for that Narcan machine. And then included within that, they talked about the Greenville Museum of Art that spends almost about $10,000 a year through the Sheriff's Sharp and Wear programs, providing art instruction as part of the recovery process. So we can take all of that into consideration in addition to the information in the municipalities meeting. And then we had additional requests that were received that were not part of the PCOC discussions. One of those was a significant request from Port Health. You may recall that Port Health has in our Human Services building at our Government North complex a crisis bed facility. And we have asked them for a number of years to vacate that space because we could use that space for ourselves. Prior manager never pushed that because of the fear that if we push them out of our space so that we would be able to use our own space for our own needs, that the clinic would go away, that they didn't have any alternate suitable space to have that clinic. And since it's a one-of-a-kind clinic in the area, we've always just let them sit. Some of you may or may not know that Port Health has merged and joined in with Easter Seals, UCP Easter Seals. And so they now have additional funding that may be available to them through that parent organization. And I've met with both Glenn Buck with Port as well as Luann, who is the head of Port Health through Easter Seals. And they've requested $250,000 for design funding to add on to their existing facility, which is here on 5th Street near Paladin, expanded space for crisis treatment of those addicted with opioids that would then allow them to move out of our facility and expand the services offered to the community. They've also been in contact with ECU Health to be sure that this is not duplicative of what the hospital is doing with their Acadia partnership, and it would not be duplicative. It would be a win-win for both the county and for Port Health to expand their services. It's eligible under the opioid lawsuit settlement funding criteria, and it would allow them to expand services here in the community where it's already zoned and they're providing similar services for that population. With the vacancy of Jennifer Roman and the need to continue to have a person overseeing the impact of these funds and the use of these funds and the collaboration regarding these funds, there was a request from the Pitt County Public Health Department, really on my initiation and their support, to have a community development specialist one position within Pitt County Public Health. Across the state, most of these opioid funds are managed and driven by the health departments. In Pitt County, because all of this happened during a pandemic, and because there wasn't that interest expressed by Dr. Silvernail, the health director at the time, I just kept it. Really within the manager's office with the assistance of finance, and we've handled these funds. Wes Gray and Angie Manning in the health department are very interested in assuming that responsibility like other health departments. At MTW, where Wes came from, they had an opioid coordinator, and in other jurisdictions, they have opioid coordinators that are housed within the health department, funded through these funds. And I think that's really where we ought to go for the long-term sustainability of managing these funds. Behavioral Health Treatment Court requested $150,000. Hope Restorations requested $311,000. Hope Restorations is an organization that's led by Chris Jenkins, and he has a unique program wherein he, who is a licensed general contractor, takes opioid-addicted individuals and brings them in to a communal living environment, and he teaches them a trade, construction-type trades. And he buys homes that these individuals assist in learning trades and building and renovating. And once it's built, he offers those homes to those in recovery at below market rates so that they can learn to trade. Some of them become licensed in a particular trade, so they have a skill, and then they have housing to live in at below market as they continue their recovery, and then they move on to the next property. He has had tremendous success with this program over the last 8 years. It touches on both employment skills, treatment, and housing, all of which are covered by the eligible opioid Memorandum of Understanding funds. And he would like to expand that program in Pitt County. And that would cost about $311,000 to do so. Hope is Alive also made a request. Hope is Alive is a similar residential treatment program. The way their request was presented, when we ran it through the chain of approvals through the state, their requested expenditures, the way they presented them at this time, were not eligible under the opioid settlement. So here are my recommendations for year 2 spending, and then I'm happy to answer any questions and hear your directions. But if you're looking for recommendations, I would say that we refund the reentry program at Pitt Community College for $100,000 as we did last year. I'd recommend that we refund ECM for Change, the syringe service program, for $100,000 as we did last year. I would say that we add Hope Restorations for a time-tested and proven program that could make a tremendous difference in employment services, treatment, and housing here in Pitt County at $311,000. I believe if we support the $250,000 design with Port Health Services, it'll be a win-win for our own space needs within Pitt County government and those who need those services here in the community. I recommend the $80,000, which is the fully loaded cost for an opioid coordinator within the health department, and that we give $50,000 to the Pitt County Sheriff's Office so that she can restock Narcan. That would make recommended expenditures for year 2 at about $891,000 for the year. It doesn't cover all of the requests, and it doesn't spend all of your money. Some of my thinking on those projects that were not requested. So for example, the ECU Navigate Clinic, a very worthy proposal, but I'd like to finish the contract on ECU's fellowship first before we move to that. PICSA, very worthy work that they're doing. They asked for another $100,000, but they haven't spent last year's money yet. I'd like to defer that to see what they do with it. The other expenditures were not eligible when reviewed through the opioid team, and other expenditures need additional information. So there aren't any no's to the requests that are not being recommended funding, but a recommendation that we defer until we have either additional information or are able to further explore eligibility or see demonstrated progress with money that's already been allocated. With that, happy to answer any questions and comments, and when the board is satisfied, the recommended motion will be to approve year 2 funding at $891,000 and direct me to bring back that spending authorization as set forth in the timeline that was earlier in the presentation. And I can go back to that screen if you want to see that. And I'll open it for any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I like seeing the results of the money that have been spent by the agencies. You know, just how many lives they've touched and all. That is impressive to see, you know, that the money, how the money was spent, and you can track it. Okay, so I'd like to, if there are no other questions, I'd like to recommend that we authorize her to, I'd like to make a motion that we extended the recommended amount of money for 2 years, 800, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we?
I'd like to second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this. Cast your vote, please. And that is approved unanimously. Thank you, Janice.
I think I'm next up again.
You are. Lake Glenwood Park, acceptance of property.
This will be short and sweet. I don't have a set presentation for you. The information in your packet on page 63 really lay out the efforts since the last time this board touched the Lake Glenwood project, just to let you know what has happened to date. As you'll recall, October 16th, the commissioners allocated $1 million from our general fund towards the development of a park at Lake Glenwood, and that's parcel 17225. James, could I ask you to pull up that picture while I'm talking, if you would? We have attached the Opus parcel information sheet in your packet so you can see exactly the parcel that exists that we're talking about to develop the park on there. The Property Owners Association has retained Christian Porter to be their lawyer, and he has prepared a general warranty deed for acceptance by the board. He has also, whenever a nonprofit of this nature is disposing of a majority of its assets, it requires approval by the North Carolina Attorney General's office. That approval from the Attorney General's office is also contained within your package. And this is the site. You can see the green area, what looks darker green is the lake, and then on the far left, that lighter green shade is the land associated with it. We have a general warranty deed that has been prepared and reviewed by our legal department. We have the Attorney General's approval. As due diligence before the county would ever accept any property, I did retain the services of Attorney Cordell Avery to do a title search to make sure there aren't any liens, judgments, or anything reported that would be adverse to the county in the acceptance of this property. I've attached his findings, finding that there are none and that there is clear marketable title for this property. And then there are two other pieces to this puzzle. And the way the general statutes read, an owner of a high-hazard dam, which this is, as it would be part of the park in having its water feature, must have an emergency action plan that's updated annually. That emergency action plan is a document that basically says this is what's going to happen in an emergency, and that document has to be approved by the state. At your last meeting in December, you authorized us to continue to work with Amy Black's engineering firm, LJB, and she is preparing that emergency action plan for approval by the state, which should be approved by the end of the month. Once that emergency action plan is in place, then the county needs to update its hazard mitigation plan to reflect that we have the emergency action plan in place. So that's how you have all these acronyms in your materials. They're spelled out. But we need the EAP before we would accept this property so that we accept it in compliance. And then once it's accepted, later in February, Planning Department will come forward with an update to your hazard mitigation plan. And then we will move forward with the development of the park, the design, the final design of the dam and the park, and then move to get that work done. So the purpose of today's item for decision is to make you aware of the progress we've made to date and to request that this board motion to authorize the chairman to accept the donation of this parcel by general warranty deed upon completion of that emergency action plan, which we anticipate to be later in January.
Any questions?
So moved.
Second it.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Cast your vote, please. Okay. You got it. All right, we'll move on to commissioner comments. Commissioner Colson,
None.
None.
Commissioner Floyd Huggins, Commissioner White,
No comment.
Commissioner
No
McGlaughlin.
comment.
Nobody has anything to say, huh? Commissioner Ward, Commissioner Holloman, Commissioner Nunley. Okay, nobody has any comments.
Motion to go into open session? Or closed session, excuse me. I'm way ahead of myself.
And it should be very quick if the attorney could read the business.
Chair briefly comment. It has been suggested this body go into closed session under the following grounds. One, to establish or to instruct the public body staff concerning the position to be taken on behalf of the public body, negotiating terms for the acquisition of real property under North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A5, and two, to prevent the disclosure of information that is not considered a public record under North Carolina General Statute 143-318-10.
Thank you, Matt. Cast your vote. Go into closed session. Thank you. Okay, we're back in open session.
Chairman Smith, I would like to make a motion to approve the closed session minutes from December 18th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Cast your vote to approve those minutes. And that is unanimous.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
And several seconds.
Chris wants to stay. Oh, I need to vote.
I do too.